Hello, dear story lovers. At the amount of 1,000 subscribers, I will post a huge series of special stories for you. Subscribe now. Jake Cole had always preferred solitude. Xelion Prime, a distant planet with lush jungles and sky-tickling mountains, was his personal Eden. As an exobiologist, he had been sent by the Terran Research Institute to study the planet's unique flora and fauna, far from the politics and noise of Earth. The days were peaceful, the nights quiet until the sky burned. It began as a faint streak of light on the horizon, a comet perhaps, but then it split into two fiery trails. Jake squinted through his telescope and saw the unmistakable silhouette of a vessel alien in origin hurtling towards the forest canopy. Moments later, the ground shook violently, and a muffled explosion echoed across the valley. "Damn," Jake muttered, heart pounding. Crashes weren't unheard of. Xelion Prime's gravitational anomalies had claimed a few Terran research drones before. But this was no drone. Grabbing his emergency pack, he climbed into his hover rover and set out toward the crash site, the treetops glowing faintly with the light of the wreckage. As he neared the site, the air grew heavy with the scent of burned metal and charred vegetation. A clearing had been carved into the forest, the trees bent back as if bowing to an unseen force. In the center of the destruction lay a twisted, metallic husk. Jake's headlamp illuminated the wreckage, its alien design clearly advanced smooth curves, no seams, and faint lines pulsing with dying energy. He heard a sound faint, almost imperceptible. A groan? Jake approached cautiously, scanning for signs of life. Among the shattered fragments of the ship, he saw her. At first, he thought it was an illusion, a trick of the light. She lay crumpled against a piece of the ship, her form glowing faintly in the darkness. Her skin shimmered like liquid silver, her face strikingly humanoid, but with features too perfect, too symmetrical to belong to his species. Translucent wings, crumpled and torn, were folded against her back. "Alive," Jake whispered, kneeling beside her. She was breathing barely. A gash along her abdomen oozed an iridescent fluid that glowed faintly. Her chest rose and fell in shallow bursts, and her expression was twisted in pain. "Hold on," he said, his voice soft but urgent. From his pack, he pulled a medikit and quickly scanned her with his bioanalyzer. Unsurprisingly, her biology was a mystery. The device flashed red, its readings chaotic. "No time for diagnostics," Jake muttered. He rummaged through his kit, pulling out a dermal regenerator. Though designed for humans, it was his best option. Gently, he applied it to her wound, watching as the device stitched her shimmering skin back together, the glow dimming but steadying. Her breathing grew more regular. Jake let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Just as he thought she'd stabilized, her eyes flickered open, two glowing amethyst orbs that locked onto his. Jake froze, caught between awe and terror. Her lips moved, forming words in a language he didn't recognize. It was melodic, like a song, but urgent. "I don't understand," he said, shaking his head. He tapped the translator on his wrist, activating it. "Try again." Her voice came through, garbled at first, then clear. "Help. Me." "You're safe," Jake assured her. "I'll get you out of here." With effort, he lifted her into his arms. She was surprisingly light, her body radiating a faint warmth. As he carried her back to his rover, he couldn't help but notice how fragile she felt, like she didn't belong in this world. The ride back to the outpost was tense. Every bump and lurch of the rover made Jake glance back at her. She drifted in and out of consciousness, murmuring words that the translator struggled to keep up with. "Leary," she said at one point, and the translator rendered it as a name. "Leary. Must survive." "You will," Jake promised, though he wasn't sure if she understood. Back at the outpost, Jake laid her on a sterilized examination table and connected her to an array of monitors. He patched into his station's central AI, feeding it every data point he could gather about her physiology. It wasn't much, but the AI's predictive algorithms helped stabilize her further. As the night deepened, Jake sat by her side, his mind racing. Who was she? Where had she come from? What had brought her to this remote corner of the galaxy? He watched the steady rise and fall of her chest, the soft glow of her skin lighting the room like a living star. And yet, beneath his scientific curiosity, he felt something deeper, a pull, an unshakable connection to this otherworldly being. It was irrational, but it was there, growing stronger with each passing moment. By the time dawn broke over Xelian Prime, Jake realized that saving her life had set something into motion. Something far greater than himself. Little did he know, it would change his life and the galaxy forever. The gentle hum of machinery filled the air as Leary stirred. Jake, seated nearby with a steaming mug of synthesized coffee, leaned forward as her glowing eyelids fluttered open. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling, her violet eyes unfocused, before turning to meet Jake's gaze. The intensity of her stare sent a jolt through him, equal parts awe and unease. Easy, he said, raising his hands as if calming a startled animal. You're safe. Her lips moved, her voice like a melody, but the translator on Jake's wrist crackled incoherently. Jake adjusted the settings, his heart pounding. When the device finally deciphered her words, they came through haltingly but clear. Where am I? Xelian Prime, Jake answered. You crashed here last night. I found you near the wreckage. Her eyes flicked around the room, taking in the sterile walls of Jake's outpost and the makeshift medical equipment surrounding her. Her gaze finally settled back on him, a flicker of gratitude softening her features. You saved me? Jake nodded. I couldn't just leave you there. She tried to sit up, but a sharp intake of breath stopped her. Jake instinctively reached out to steady her. Careful. You're still healing. Leary's hand, delicate, faintly glowing, brushed against his arm. It felt warm, almost electric, and Jake found himself momentarily frozen. Your kindness. It is rare, she murmured. Among my people, saving a life creates a bond. A bond? Jake asked, tilting his head. She hesitated, her expression unreadable. It is complicated. Jake decided not to press her just yet. What happened? Why were you flying over this planet? Leary's gaze grew distant, her voice tinged with sorrow. My ship malfunctioned. I was mapping star systems for my people. An energy anomaly disabled my navigation systems. I lost control. Jake leaned forward. Anomaly? Xelian Prime does have some strange magnetic fields, but I've never heard of them affecting advanced tech like yours. It was not natural, Leary said, her voice low. There was interference. A signal, artificial but unfamiliar. It drew me off course. Jake frowned. The idea of an artificial signal emanating from Xelian Prime undetected by the Terran Research Institute was unsettling. He filed the thought away for later. Do your people know you're here? Will they come for you? Leary shook her head, her wings shifting slightly. My ship's beacon is damaged. Without it, they will not find me. Jake felt a pang of empathy. She was stranded, alone on a foreign world, much like he had felt when he first arrived on Xelian Prime. Well, you're not alone now, he said, offering a small smile. We'll figure this out. Her eyes softened, and she nodded, though the weight of her predicament still hung in the air. For a moment, they sat in silence, the rhythmic beeping of the monitors the only sound. Over the next few days, Leary regained her strength under Jake's care. She proved to be a quick learner, adapting to his rudimentary Terran technology with an almost childlike curiosity. Jake, in turn, found himself fascinated by her stories of Vaner, a crystalline planet where the skies pulsed with color and the people lived in harmony with the energy fields that surrounded them. They are not like you, Leary said one evening as they watched the twin moons rise over the forest. My people are connected. We feel the energy of all things, the balance of life. Jake, sitting beside her, raised an eyebrow. Sounds poetic. Humans, well, we're not so good at harmony. We like to conquer things. Control them. Leary tilted her head, her expression unreadable. And yet, you did not conquer me. You saved me. That speaks of a deeper truth. Her words lingered in the air, and Jake felt a flush rise to his cheeks. He quickly changed the subject. So, these wings of yours. Can you actually fly? Leary smiled faintly. Not in your gravity. Your planet's pull is too strong. But at home, yes. We glide, carried by the energy streams. Jake marveled at her wings, their translucent surface catching the moonlight. You're amazing, you know that? She looked at him, her gaze steady. And you are unlike any human I have ever known. The moment hung between them, charged with something Jake couldn't quite define. He cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. Well, let's focus on getting you back to your people. Leary's expression darkened, and she looked away. There is something you must understand, Jake. In my culture, saving a life. It is not a small thing. It creates a bond, a sacred connection. Jake frowned. You mentioned that before. What does it mean, exactly? She hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her chair. It means you have taken responsibility for me. My life is now tied to yours. Wait, tied how? Jake asked, leaning forward. Leary met his gaze, her violet eyes steadied but full of unspoken weight. In my people's eyes, this bond can only be sealed one way. Through union. A marriage. Jake blinked, stunned. Marriage? You're joking, right? Her expression remained serious. I am not. Jake stood, running a hand through his hair as he paced the room. You can't be serious. I mean, we barely know each other. Leary rose shakily to her feet, her wings shimmering faintly as she steadied herself. It is not a matter of choice. It is tradition, bound by the laws of my people. Jake stopped, turning to face her. And if I say no? Leary's face fell. Then I must leave. I cannot remain here with you, not as I am. The thought of her leaving sent an unexpected pang through Jake's chest. He had grown used to her presence, her strange beauty, her endless curiosity. The idea of her disappearing from his life felt wrong. I need time to think, he said finally, his voice strained. Leary nodded, her expression unreadable. Of course. But the time we have may be short. Jake watched her retreat to the guest chamber, his mind a whirl of questions. Could he truly commit to such a bond, to a life with someone so alien in every way? And yet, deep down, he knew this wasn't just about tradition. It was about Leary herself and the growing pull he felt toward her, like a gravity all its own. Jake spent the night staring at the holographic star map projected above his desk, its blue light flickering against the dark walls of the outpost. The swirling patterns of galaxies offered no answers to the storm of questions in his mind. He replayed Leary's words over and over, it is not a matter of choice. It is tradition, bound by the laws of my people. Marriage. To an alien. It sounded like something out of the pulp novels he'd read as a teenager, not the reality he now faced. He wasn't even sure what that would entail. What did a marriage on Vainer mean? Was it symbolic? Physical? Lifelong? He had no frame of reference. And yet, when he thought of Leary leaving, the idea felt worse than any uncertainty her proposal posed. By morning, he still hadn't made a decision. The smell of synthetic coffee filled the air as Jake found Leary in the outpost's small common area. She was seated near the viewport, gazing at the forest below with a pensive expression. Her wings shimmered faintly in the pale morning light, though the edges were still frayed from the crash. Despite her ethereal appearance, there was an undeniable fragility to her, both physical and emotional. "Good morning," Jake said, forcing his voice to sound casual as he handed her a steaming mug. She looked at it curiously before accepting it with a small nod. "Morning," she replied, her voice soft. She cradled the mug in her hands, but didn't drink. Her violet eyes flicked to him. "You've been thinking." Jake chuckled, though the sound was hollow. "That obvious?" She tilted her head slightly. "To me, yes. Your energy is unsettled." "Right." He rubbed the back of his neck, unsure how to approach the topic delicately. Finally, he decided to be direct. "Leary, I've been thinking about what you said. About the bond. The marriage." Her gaze lowered, and she nodded, her expression unreadable. "I understand it is not your way. It is not something I expect you to accept easily." "That's the thing," Jake said, sitting across from her. "I don't know if I can. This is all so alien to me." No pun intended. She smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. "I would not force this upon you, Jake. If you choose to refuse, I will honor that. I will leave, and my people will consider the bond severed." "And what happens to you if you leave?" Jake asked, leaning forward. Leary hesitated, her fingers tightening around the mug. "I would return to my people, but my place among them would change. To refuse the bond is to break the cycle of harmony. I would be seen as—" She searched for the right word. "Incomplete." Jake frowned. "So, you'd be punished for this?" "Not directly. But I would be outcast. My wings would no longer carry me, my voice no longer heard in the chorus." Her words stung more than Jake expected. He had seen her resilience, her curiosity, her quiet strength. The thought of her being shunned for something beyond her control felt deeply unjust. "But if I accept," Jake said, his voice quieter now, "what happens then? What does this marriage even mean?" Leary's gaze met his, and for a moment, the glow in her eyes seemed softer. "It means our lives are intertwined. We would share the path ahead, whatever it brings. For my people, marriage is not just a union of individuals, but a merging of fates. We would face the future as one." Jake sighed, leaning back in his chair. "That sounds heavy." "It is," Leary admitted. "But it is also beautiful." Jake decided to seek advice. He spent the next few hours sending encrypted messages to his colleagues back on Earth, including Dr. Elena Voss, a cultural anthropologist who had experience with alien traditions. Her reply was swift and blunt. This could open unprecedented avenues for interspecies diplomacy and understanding. But proceed cautiously. Cultural traditions are rarely simple, and the risks, both personal and professional, are significant. Another message from his old friend Sam was less academic. "You're seriously thinking about marrying an alien? You've got guts, man. Or you've lost your mind." Neither response helped much. That evening, Jake and Leary ventured outside the outpost. The air was crisp, carrying the scents of the alien forest, and the twin moons bathed the landscape in silver light. They walked in silence for a while, the tension between them palpable. Finally, Jake stopped and turned to her. "Why me?" he asked. "Out of all the people in the galaxy, why am I the one who saved you? Why are we standing here right now?" Leary regarded him thoughtfully. "The universe is not random, Jake. My people believe in the threads, a web of energy connecting all living things. You were meant to find me, just as I was meant to be here." "I don't believe in fate," Jake said, shaking his head. "Perhaps not," Leary said, stepping closer. "But I believe in you." Jake's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, he felt the pull of her words, the sincerity in her gaze. He wanted to believe her, to let go of his doubts and embrace the connection they seemed to share. But could he? Could he give up the life he knew for something so uncertain? Back at the outpost, Jake stood outside Leary's door, his hand hovering over the control panel. Finally, he pressed the button, and the door slid open. Leary looked up from where she was seated on the edge of the bed, her wings draped softly behind her. "I've made my decision," Jake said, his voice steady. She rose, her eyes searching his face. "And?" Jake took a deep breath. "I don't know where this path leads, and I'm scared as hell about what it means. But I don't want you to leave. I don't want to lose you." Leary's expression shifted, a mixture of relief and something deeper, something that made Jake's chest tighten. "You would accept the bond?" "I would," Jake said, stepping closer. "If it means I get to stay by your side, I'll do it." A faint glow spread across Leary's face, and she extended her hand. Jake took it, the warmth of her touch grounding him in the moment. Her voice was soft but firm as she said, "Then we walk this path together." In that moment, the weight of tradition, uncertainty, and fear fell away, leaving only the strange, beautiful connection between them. Jake knew the road ahead would be anything but easy, but for the first time, he felt ready to face it. Together. The twin suns of Xelian Prime hung low in the sky, their golden rays painting the forest canopy in hues of amber and crimson. In the clearing just outside Jake's outpost, an otherworldly scene was unfolding. Representatives from two worlds, Earth and Vaynerhead, gathered under the vast open sky to witness an event unprecedented in galactic history. Jake adjusted his formal Terran uniform, feeling both out of place and deeply honored. Standing beside him, Leary looked radiant, her shimmering wings fully healed and extended behind her, catching the sunlight like prisms. She wore a traditional Vaynorian ceremonial garment, woven from threads of light that seemed to ripple and dance with every movement. Her eyes met Jake's, and he felt the familiar pull of her presence, grounding him amidst the surreal chaos of the day. The ceremony was a fusion of their two cultures, hastily but thoughtfully constructed to honor both traditions. On one side of the clearing stood Jake's colleagues from Earth, including a delegation from the Terran Research Institute. On the other, a small group of Vaynorians who had arrived in a sleek, crystalline vessel after Leary had finally repaired and activated her ship's distress beacon. The ceremony began with a speech from Leary's elder, a tall, ethereal figure whose voice resonated like a symphony. He spoke in Vaynorian, but the translator Jake wore conveyed the words clearly. "This bond between Leary and Jake is a merging of not only two lives, but two worlds. It is a testament to the strength of connection, the power of compassion, and the hope that harmony can transcend the stars." Next came Dr. Elena Voss, who represented Earth's delegation. She spoke with conviction, highlighting the significance of this union as a bridge between species. In a galaxy too often divided by fear and misunderstanding, today we choose unity. Jake and Leary's bond is a reminder that love and respect are universal, no matter how different we may seem. Jake barely heard the rest of the speeches. His attention was focused on Leary, her glowing presence a beacon of calm amidst his nerves. When the time came for their vows, they stepped forward, facing each other under the arch of woven Vaynorian light that had been erected for the occasion. Leary spoke first, her voice steady and melodic. "Jake, when I fell from the stars, I thought my journey had ended. But you found me. You gave me your kindness, your strength, and your hope. In my people's eyes, you are not just my savior, you are my partner, my equal, my bondmate. I vow to walk beside you, no matter where this path leads." Jake's chest tightened at her words. He took a deep breath, his own voice rough but sincere. "Leary, before you, I thought I understood the universe, its rules, its boundaries. But you've shown me that it's so much bigger, so much more than I ever imagined. You've taught me about courage, trust, and a connection that goes beyond words. I promise to stand with you, to learn from you, and to face whatever comes next together." As they exchanged vows, Leary extended her hand, and a small crystal materialized in her palm. It pulsed faintly, a fragment of her ship's core, a symbol of her home and her journey. She placed it in Jake's hands, its warmth spreading through his skin. In return, Jake presented her with a simple band of alloy, inscribed with a star map of the Milky Way, a piece of his own world, a promise etched in metal. The elder raised his hands, and the arch of light pulsed brightly, sealing the ceremony. The bond is forged. 2 lives, 2 fates, now one. Cheers erupted from both sides of the gathering, the air alive with celebration. Leary's people sang a hauntingly beautiful melody, their voices harmonizing in a way that made the forest itself seem to hum in response. Jake's colleagues clapped and exchanged awed glances, the weight of the moment not lost on anyone. After the ceremony, Jake and Leary stood together at the edge of the clearing, watching the crowd mingle. Earth's delegation was deep in conversation with the Vaynorians, exchanging knowledge and stories. The two cultures, so different yet so similar, were beginning to connect in ways Jake had never dreamed possible. "Do you think they'll manage to get along?" Jake asked, a hint of amusement in his voice. Leary tilted her head, her wings catching the light. "If we can, they can." Jake chuckled. "Fair point." As the sun dipped below the horizon, the clearing was illuminated by the bioluminescent plants native to Zelian Prime. Leary turned to Jake, her expression soft. "You've changed my path, Jake. I thought my journey was over, but now I see it was only beginning." Jake took her hand, the crystal she had given him still warm in his pocket. "I think we both needed each other. And I don't know where this journey is taking us, but I'm glad it's with you." In the weeks that followed, Jake and Leary prepared for their next steps. Messages were sent between Earth and Vayner, laying the groundwork for an official alliance. Jake was given the opportunity to visit Leary's homeworld, an honor that filled him with both excitement and trepidation. The night before their departure, Jake stood outside the outpost, staring up at the stars. Leary joined him, her presence as steadying as ever. "Do you miss your home?" he asked. Leary nodded. "Always. But I carry it with me, in my heart. And now, I carry you, too." Jake smiled, his hand finding hers. "And I carry you. Wherever we go." The crystalline Vaynorian ship awaited them, its surface shimmering like a captured star. As they boarded, Jake couldn't help but glance back at Zelian Prime, the planet where his life had changed forever. The doors closed behind them, and with a soft hum, the ship rose into the sky. Jake and Leary stood side by side, staring out at the vast expanse of the galaxy ahead. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The stars beckoned, and their journey was only beginning.